hopefully this will hold. Okay. So today's broadcast, I believe, is sponsored by the Zimmerman family. Nishmas, I don't remember who. And in honor of the Chasana of Heshi Menzelowski. Well, hopefully when Akiva comes, he'll tell us the name of the yahrzeit. Okay, so let's get started. At the bottom, we're at the bottom of Kuf Nun Amud Beis. Kalal Amar Abishol Kol Shani. So let's go back to the Mishnah because the Gemara is going to be analyzing this Kalal that Abishol said. So it says in the Mishnah, all the way at the end. So our Mishnah talked about an Isser, which is also to hire Payalim on Shabbos. It's also to tell somebody to hire Payalim. And you're not allowed to wait by the Tchum to hire Payalim. So those are the Isser. Then the Mishnah discusses Heter. You're allowed to wait by the Tchum to bring payers, because that's something that's you're allowed to wait by the Tchum to watch. Okay, 1 second. I have to lower the volume here. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We'll do this again. Okay, let's try this one more time. Okay, so the Mishnah discusses Isser, and the Mishnah discusses Heter. The Heter is Machshechu Lishmar, and then after we have these two halachas, the first Isser, second Heter, Abishol says a klal. Kol Shani Zakai Ba'amirosai, whatever I'm allowed to instruct someone to do on Shabbos, Rishayani Lahach Shechalov, I'm also allowed to wait by the Tchum to run out right after Shabbos. So the Gemara now wants to know exactly what is this klal referring to. Zok tehelig Gemara. Iboyelahu. Abishol ahaya. What halacha of the Mishnah specifically is Abishol referring to? Ilema reishukai. If he's going on the halacha of Isser, that it says ein machshichin alatchum lisker payalim or lahavi payers. If that's what it means, and it's saying Isser, whatever I'm not allowed to instruct someone to do, I'm not allowed to wait by the edge of the Tchum to do, well, then Abishol didn't really express it properly, because Abishol was expressing it in terms of what's allowed, not in terms of what's not allowed. Hi, kol shani zakai b'amirosoi, rishaya ani b'chashechosoi. It should say differently. It should say kol she'eni zakai b'amirosoi, any zakai, any rishai b'chashichasim abayla. So it's not mistaber that Abishol was referring to the first half of the Mishnah. Elasefakoi. It must be Abishol is elaborating on the halacha that the Tanakhama says in the Sefer. Avol machshechu lishmar. He's allowed to wait by the edge of the Tchum so that he could run out to watch his pairs, and while he's there, maybe pairs be other. And that's what it would mean. So basically, Rashi tells us the Tanakhama said you're allowed to be machshich. V'asahiu and Abishol came v'shaveh be'klola lo v'kol k'yotzeben, and he gave a generalization so that we'll be able to figure out what other scenarios would also be allowed. So tomorrow, that's a problem as well, because high kol shani zakai b'chashichosai rishayani b'amirasim mipoyle. What it should say is exactly the opposite. That whatever I'm allowed to wait by the edge of the tchum for, there I'm also allowed to instruct somebody on Shabbos to do it. And he said exactly the opposite. And Rashi tells us, let's just see the Gimel. Rashi tells us that Teir de Chashecha Tanan, the Mishnah explicitly talks about waiting by the edge of the Tchum to go out to watch your payers. The Heter de Amir Leutnan, the Mishnah doesn't directly discuss instructing somebody to go watch my payers. So Behechi Toli Tanya Leutanya. So Abishol should have started with the Mutter Lahachshich, and he should have said, whatever I'm allowed to be machshich for, I'm also allowed to instruct. That's what it is say. So we're a little bit stuck as to what Abishol is referring to. Abishol is going on the heter. And Abishol is actually referring to a third case that's not even explicitly mentioned in the Mishnah. But it's a halacha that for sure the Tanakama would agree to. A person on Shabbos is allowed to instruct his friend, and he has pears in an orchard that's out of his reach, it's out of his tchum, and his friend has pears in an orchard that's out of his friend's tchum, but in my pears that are within your reach. And I will watch your pears that although they're out of your reach, they're in my reach. And then that Abishol said, would you not agree to me to be machshir? So let's see Rashi to explain to us exactly where Abishol is coming to differ from the Tanakama. Where did we have a case of Amira that the Mishnah discusses laheter that we want to say since the Amira is mutter, so too the Achshacha is mutter, the Toli B'Achshacha ahalkoi. It's actually going on a case that's not mentioned explicitly in the Mishnah. To Rabbi Yehuda, the case of Rabbi Yehuda, where we can take care of each other's, we can instruct each other to take care of each other's orchards. Alma zakayani b'amirasei. So clearly there, we're allowed to have this discussion on Shabbos. Everybody agrees without a doubt, both the Tanakama and Abishol, that we're allowed to discuss watching each other's orchards. And Abishol told the Tanakama, do you not agree in this case? Surely you would agree that you're allowed to wait by the end of the tchum to go watch your pairs. And you'd also agree that it would be mutter to instruct your friend to do it, just like we quoted from Shmuel. Alma, you see, so you see that there's a link. Since you're allowed to make this deal with your friend on Shabbos, therefore you yourself are allowed to wait at the edge of the tchum to go watch your own pairs on Shabbos. Hilchach, amay noktas, hachshacha, lishmar l'chuda. Why did you just pick this case, Tanakama? Why did you just pick this case that you're allowed to wait by the edge of the tchum to go watch your pairs? Shavi kol milsa. Why aren't you much broader in your instruction? Ve'ema kol shani zakai bami rosoi. Anytime I'm allowed to discuss this on Shabbos, why is it better to describe this in broader terms? Because the Shemami Nohach, you'll know this halacha, which you actually stated explicitly, but the Shemami No, you'll also be able to learn from this mace and kala, which we're going to discuss soon. That a mace and a kala you're also allowed to be machshich for and discuss. And the Mishnah is going to, the Gemara is going to discuss those cases later. The Hanami Zakoi Bamirasehu. In those places, you're also allowed to instruct. Like the Gemara is going to illustrate shortly. And therefore you'd be able to wait there. The Tanakama will actually disagree, and they'll hold by the mason, by the kala, you could not. Because there it's doing something that's also in Shabbos. And therefore, the next mission that we're going to learn that talks about the Iske Kala, that you're allowed to machshich on the tchum, that's Abishol. But the Tanakama restricts the heter only to malachas that are mutter. Since you're allowed to watch pairs on Shabbos, you're allowed to be machshich. Other things that you might do for a mace or for a kala, even though you're allowed to instruct someone to do it, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to be machshich on Shabbos for such an action. So let's see what the Gemara says right. So why was Abishol so excited about this klal and not just pinpointing the specific case that the Tanakama discussed? It's because Lasuye Hadu Taner Rabbanan, because he also wants to include the following halacha. Ein machshichin al tchum lahavi behema. If you have a behema that's out of the tchum, it escaped, and you get it, you're not allowed to leave the tchum, so you're not allowed to wait by the tchum, so you could run right away outside of the tchum to get your behema. But if you were standing out of the, if the animal was out of the tchum and you're in the tchum and you can't get to it, you're allowed to call to it to bring it to you, that it should walk towards you. That you're allowed to do. Klal Omer Abishol. Abishol said this rule. Kol shani zakai b'mirasei. Anything that I'm allowed to discuss. So if I'm allowed to instruct someone to do something, I'm also allowed to wait by the edge of the tchum to get it. Umachshichin lefakeach al iskei kala. I'm also allowed to wait by the edge of the tchum if I have to go take care of something to prepare for a kala Motzei Shabbos out of the tchum. And if I also have to prepare something for a mace, I'm allowed to wait. Like lahavi, lo'oren v'techrichem. And this is the point that the Tatakama argues on, like Rashi mentions. For Omrim loy, and you could instruct somebody on Shabbos to do stuff for you after Shabbos. And you could tell them, Lech l'makom ploni. Go to this place where you could find oren and techrichem. If you cannot find what we're looking for in this place, then you can go to plan B. Or if you couldn't find, I instructed you to pay $100 to buy this. If you were unable to find it for $100, so you're allowed to give someone instructions on Shabbos what he should do after Shabbos to acquire these things. Just like a shol holds, you're allowed to wait by the edge of the tchum to do that. While the Tanakama, although they hold, you're allowed to give instructions for someone to do it after Shabbos because there's no Isser involved, being machshech on the tchum, that you're not allowed to do. Rabbi Yosy agrees with this, the Tanakama, the Brisa. He just says you're not allowed to discuss specific numbers. You're just allowed to discuss the general needs that have to be taken care of. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Machshichin al tchum lefakeach al iskei kala al iskei meis. This is exactly the Mishnah that we're saying is going according to Abishol, but the Tanakama would disagree. Now, in those days, they used to play flutes by Levias. There's a song that's called Taps, I think, that they play with bagpipes by military funerals. Is that accurate what I'm saying? So it's also some type of it's
played by a
also
horn.
a wind instrument. So there was a horn. So wind instruments
also a movie.
are used by Levias. What? It's also what?
A movie.
Also
a military movie. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So the halach is, what if a goy brought flutes on Shabbos? Lo yispoid behen Yisrael. He brought them from out of the tchum. You're not allowed to use that for the hesped of Yid, ela imkein bo mimokum korev, unless they came from within the tchum. And this is the subject of a big machloikis between Rashi and Tosfos. So let's see Rashi. Lo yispoid ben Yisrael lo olam. You're never ever allowed to use those flutes. Period. Why not? It seems to be clear that these flutes were brought for this mace, and therefore, no matter when you'll use it, it'll be known that the goy was Machal Shabbos. Therefore, you're not allowed to use it. Tosfos argues. Tosfos is like a Pirsha Kuntris, Shapir Shalomis. And he brings a raya from the Gemara that asks the kasha later from a brayso that says you are allowed to use it later on. It just means if it would have taken 2 hours to get these flutes from out of the tchum, you have to wait 2 hours. Again, he argues on Rashi. Normally, these flutes aren't brought for a specific mace; they're brought in general to be used by Mason. They're part of the tools of the Steele's College Chapel, but they're not for a specific mace. And B'chtei Shiyasu would be allowed because it was designated for a specific mace. Then there could be a bezoin for the mace. We're going to see such a svara later. Zok Gemara weiter. Also, Loy Oren, what if the Goyim made
Was
an
he
Oren?
asked? Was the guy asked to bring it, or did
It
he
seems
just?
not. It seems not.
So that
He brought it
did.
for the Eid.
No one told him
Rashi, he
anything.
brought it for the Eid, even though you didn't ask.
Yeah. So why should that affect anything? Nobody asked him. It wasn't expected. He happened to bring it. Shouldn't it be okay?
It doesn't seem like, no, it seems like he brought it specifically
Brought it
for
specifically
the,
for that.
maybe he worked for the funeral chapel. He knows they needed it. So he brought it for them. It's just speaking where there must be some relationship there because the guy brought it with the express purpose of servicing the Jew.
Still, it seems
And-
like
and see,
seems like a
the Lashon Knas is a little bit difficult because Knas usually is a punishment for someone who did something wrong. Here, no one instructed him. The mere fact that he brought it for the Eid, we create this Knas. But also, loy aron, if the guy made an aron to bury a guy, or he built it to sell, like Rashi says, or v'chafru loy kever, or they dug a grave for a guy, then you cover by Yisrael, because that for sure, there's no makom of knas, it was made for a guy. But shvil Yisrael, if it's for the Yid, lo you cover by Elamish, you're never allowed to bury a Yid in a caver that was specifically dug by a guy for a Yid on Shabbos.
do we
There's-
paskin like this?
I believe so.
Because all those stories that you have of calling a goy to do something of an oven because the chont wouldn't be hot or something, that seems to be worse than this case. There you're asking him or you're hinting to him. And you're letting him know that he's needed to.
Well, you're supposed to make him enjoy it so that he should be doing it for himself.
Well, he expects to get paid in this case in the Mishnah, doesn't he?
Yeah.
That
I'm assuming
seems
he
to
does.
be his job, so he is doing it for himself.
Well, I'm not sure how that works. If he's doing it for the Yid to get paid, I'm not sure how that works. I don't know.
Yes. What's the hobby of thinking that we could use chalolin at the mace anyway, or not able to use instruments? Like what's the
For
Isser?
after
During
Shabbos.
Espedim, they used to play these flutes.
So that's paid in on Shabbos or after Shabbos?
After Shabbos. Levi would be after Shabbos.
Ah. Okay.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. So yes, if a goy does something for a Yid, now by Kforim, we're going to see from the Gemara that it's more serious because it's a bezoin for a mace that he should be buried in a place where everyone knows that there was Chil Shabbos made for him. So let's see what it says. My mimakim karv. What does the Mishnah mean that you're allowed to use these flutes if they were mimakim karv? Rav Amar mimakim karv mamish. It means we know for a fact that they didn't go out of Tchum. Sheyidul on a beer hadavar the mimakim karv bo shuri inum shayu bevesoi. We saw that the goy had him in his house in the Tchum. Ushmul Amar chashinon shema chutz l'chayim alona. We're choshid that maybe he had it there. He had it within the Tchum before Shabbos. Rashi points out that it's interesting. Chashinon is normally a term used when you're choshish l'chumra. Here we say, since misofik, we could say that he had it within the Tchum before Shabbos, you could be makel because of it. Rashi says, Chashinon shem chutz l'chayim alonu, afilu ahevi nechutz la'ir, even if he brought it nechutz la'ir, we know he came into the city, so we don't know for sure where it was last night. On the toil nahatir will be toil misofik to be matir. Maybe Friday night it was within the tchum, and therefore you're allowed to use the Motzei Shabbos. The Chayshinon Zakrashi, which is normally used l'chumra, the Chayshinon nami armina l'kula. We actually do use the word Chayshinon. It's found elsewhere in Shas where it's used l'kula. A besula became expectant, and this is not referring to Mary, where it's an impossibility. This is where it actually could have happened. Chayshinon. So the question is, do we say she's possible to a kohen? So the Gemara Chayshinon Shema Bambati Ibra, and this is why we do not allow women to use a men's mikveh until the water is drained and the mikveh is scrubbed, because we don't want to have a confusing Father's Day. Umuteres l'kahuna. That's why they say the most confusing day in Harlem is Father's Day, right? So we clean our mikvahs carefully. And that's why when men try to use ladies' mikvahs, such as once Rabbi Sofer came to Bilyurt for Shabbos, and they asked permission for him to use the mikveh. He wanted to use the mikveh Shabbos morning. So when they asked him, Shlomo Miller, what to do, Shlomo Miller told David Kleiner, tell Rabbi Sofer that he can go jump in the lake if he wants to go to the mikveh. So he said, Shmuel, Hachi Kamer Mesisim. Lo Yisboid Behen Yisrael. A Yid, Yisrael, should not make a hesped with these flutes. Elam Kain, Yeshlit Loish Shabo Mimakim Korah. Unless there's a possibility where you can say that it was within the tchum before Shabbos. And when it is it osir? Ulafukai biyadua de michutz l'tchumbo. While Rav says will only be mattered if we know for a fact that it was within the tchum. So that's the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Yeah.
Aren't we worried about Hatzah?
Oh, you're mamish gavaltik. You are mamish gavaltik. Let's see Toises. Elam kei boim makom korav. Teimal Rebbe. My mahani shaboim makom korav. Halo hevim derech rishus harabim. Exactly David's kasha. Halo hevim derech rishus harabim. Umali oron v'kever shenasu b'Shabbos. At the save of the Mishnah and the oron and the kever otherwise. So what the focus is not so much on whether there's an isser done. The focus is also on how integral that isser is to our needs. And since it's not needed because we could have easily transferred it right after Shabbos, so the goy's work that he did on Shabbos doesn't really impact us too much. But that's a beautiful kasha. I was thinking, should I learn Tosis? So when you asked it, I said, gavaltik. You have the Tosis kasha.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the kasha again?
The kasha is, why are we making such a big deal about whether or not these chalin came michutz l'tchum? Even if they came from within the tchum, they had to be ma'avid and rishus l'shus, from one rishus ha'yachid into the rishus harabim into another rishus ha'yachid. And that Tosis and Echanami. But we're not worried about that issue, and that won't make its permanent mark on these chalilin because we don't really need that. Once they're within the city, we could have easily transported them Motzai Shabbos. Zok the Gemara. This is a little bit confusing, this Gemara, but we're going to read it like the Gemara says. B'tanya Kavasa de Rav. We have a brisa that seems to indicate that. I'm sorry, I skipped some. Dekamas is Kavasa de Shmuel. We have a diak from Mishnah like Shmuel that you're mekel misafik. The Katani also loy alright v'chafer loy kever. If a goy for his own purposes made an honor in a kever, yikover by Yisrael, then a yid could be burnt it, could be buried in it. Almo, you see from here, misvei kashari, misafik it's mutter. Hachadami misvei kashari. So too, in our case, misafik it will be mutter. There are those who take the skirts out and they don't learn that this is a raya. Now, there's a famous story with a hospital that was built in Eretz Yisrael. And here we have a kever built for a goy. We have tachrichim for a goy, an oren for a goy. There was a hospital that was built in Israel. And during the ribbon cutting ceremony, when they opened up this hospital, they had a whole entourage of dignitaries and politicians that were there for the opening. And there were Arab dignitaries as well. And the Arab dignitaries always have to set a jach to attack the Yidden. So they say, for the Jews, you build such a hospital. For us, you don't build such hospitals. In the territories, you don't build such hospitals, only for the Jews. So without skipping a beat, this Israeli who was heading the delegation couldn't contain himself. And he said, what are you talking about? We hope every sick person in this hospital is an Arab. It's only the maternity ward that we hope is full of Jews. He probably regretted it as soon as it came out of his mouth, but it was such a good line.
Yosy, sorry, just quickly, your answer for Tyson on Duvi's kasha, well, Tyson's kasha that Duvi asked, reminds me of something, and maybe it's not this Gemara. Don't we have this concept where if something was brought or done on Shabbos. We knas the person that he has to wait this month after Shabbos.
B'chtei sheyasu.
Is that this sugya? You know what I'm talking about?
Sure. If a malacha is done, if a yid does a malacha b'shoyig, you have to wait b'chtei sheyasu. And the Rishonim speak about it. Why is it that if a yid does a malacha on Shabbos, it's not asur lo'olam, it's only asur b'chtei sheyasu. Yet if a goy does it, at least according to Rashi, it's going to be asur forever. Right? Tosfos learns anyway, it's only asur b'chtei sheyasu. But Rashi wants to learn that these flutes will be asur forever.
Yeah.
So they do speak about that. They do speak about that. Why over here it's worse?
Wait, this place is saying today Shiasa? No.
I'm sorry?
This place did he talk about today Shiasa?
No, the Tosfos before does.
Okay.
The Tosfos before, right? He argues on Rashi, who says that's also forever. Yes, but there is something called Shiasa. But what Tosfos here is saying, if it's Mimakim Korev, yeah, you might have to wait B'chtei Shiasa, but B'chtei Shiasa is nothing because it's right in the city. B'chtei Shiasa is only a significant amount of time when it's talking about something coming from out of the Tchum. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Now, a lot of people don't like this raya because Tosfos asks, how do you see from here that if a goy made it for the goy that you're allowed to use it? How do you see that the mistake is sorry? The Gemara is going to explain the Gemara is going to explain that this case, where if it was made for the goy, if the kever was dug for the goy, he's allowed to use it, that's only in a place where it's obvious that it was done for the goy. So where do you see misafik that it's mutter? So Tosfos is not goyish this. A lot of people take out this girsa where there's a raya to Shmuel from this brisa. And then the Gemara continues on and says, Tanya Kavos the Rav, we're going to learn that at face value, but Tosfos learns, and Rashi brings down in the second shot, that this is not a raya to Rav, what we're about to quote. What we're about to quote is actually a raya to Shmuel. But let's first learn it at face value. The Tanya Kavos the Rav, that it would be asur misafik. Ir she Yisrael, the Nachem Darimba. If there's a city that both Jews and Goyim live in, and there was a merchatz that was operational, that was open on Shabbos, and it was run by Goyim. Im roiv Nachem, if most of the city are Goyim, so we can assume that any water that was heated up primarily to service the Goyim, then la'erev roichetz ba miyad. Then come out to Shabbos, a Yid's allowed to bathe in that merchatz right away because nothing was heated for the Yid on Shabbos. But on Rav Yisrael, if most of the city are Yidden, and therefore the attendant for sure cooked up water on Shabbos so that it should be ready for the Yidden that are coming Motzai Shabbos, then Yamtim Achdeich Sheyechemu Cham. Then you'd have to wait until it's heated up. Mechzal Mechza, if it's a suffix, Asr the Yamtim Achri Gidei Sheyechemu Cham. So on the side of the girsa that we have, that we're trying to bring a raya to Rav L'chumra, this is the raya. The raya is from the Tanakama, who says that mechzal mechza, you have to go L'chumra. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bambati Ktana, if it's a very small bath, im yesh bo rishus, if there's a very powerful person there, a goy who has a lot of attendants who come with him that could quickly turn around that mikveh and heat up the water in a very short period of time, then then the Yid's allowed to use it right away. Rashi says, because you could rely on the fact that they did this for the goy and it was done already after dark because they had a lot of labor that they were able to turn this around very quickly. So you just have to wait a little bit. My rishus, what does rishus mean? If there's a powerful person there with a lot of attendants, they could warm up, they have the capacity to warm up a lot of water very quickly. If it's a small bath, which means they would have been able to change the water quickly on it, mutter lichitz b'miyad. So in the second girsa, this is a raya to Shmuel. And we'll look at Rashi, where he says that Lishna China Gasin Tanya goes to the Shmuel. This Bryce that we quoted is a raya to Shmuel. He takes out the whole part of, he takes out the whole first part. The whole first part, where it was originally a right to Shmuel, he deletes. And like Tosfos asks, because how do you see Misfik Asari from there anywhere? And the Ma'asis Shatel Shmuel, it's the second Gemara that he doesn't learn Tanya comes to Rav. This is the raya to Shmuel, and he brings a raya from Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says Talinu Lakula by a small ambati, and that's where there's a raya to Shmuel from the fact that in Ambati Ketana you can assume that it was made after Shabbos. And you don't have to worry. The Tanakama of this brayso seems to say that you have to be machmer mechzal mechzal aser. So Rashi says v'reisha lekashale, even the mechzal mechzal, if it's 50-50, vaday b'shvil Yisrael v'nochem huchu. If there's the same amount of Jews as there are goyim in the city, then for sure when the attendant warmed it up, he had in mind to include all his customers, both Jewish and non-Jewish. The name is Sveiko Nachri Safek Yisrael. So therefore, the final girsa of Rashi is to delete the first raya to Shmuel, which was a Shvach raya, because of Tosfos is kasha, and to change the girsa. The second raya is a raya to Shmuel from Rabbi Yehuda, and from the Tanakama it's not a raya, because a mechza is also, because if there's 50-50 Yidden and Goyim, then for sure the Goy who heated up the water had in mind the Jew. But when there's a suffix, it's a suffix if there's a rishus there, meaning a powerful person there, and there's a strong chance that the water was prepared after Shabbos, misuffic, it's going to be mutter, and that's consistent with Shmuel Shita. Zok Gemara weiter. Also loy oren, v'chafer loy kever. Goy made an oren for a goy, and he dug a kever for a goy. Why are you allowed to use this kever right away after Shabbos? Why shouldn't you also wait? So Rashi, even though we're not sure, maybe he did make it for the Eid. Zok Gemara, I'll tell you why you don't have to worry. It's because it's speaking where is this kever? This is in a main thoroughfare. Jews are never buried on the main thoroughfare. The Vaday L'Nasam Shil Yisrael. On the place where this is, it's clear that this was for sure not done for Yid, it was done for Goy, therefore the Yid can be buried there. So we're taking a kever, Oren Michael Meimar. How could you see in an Oren that the Oren was for sure built for a Goy? Again, the Oren is on the kever L'Nachi B'Shratya. The Oren was there right by the hole that was dug. So clearly they were planning to use this Oren for the same mace that they were planning to bury in this place. And therefore, since we're sure that it was done for the purposes of a goy, then even a yid's allowed to use it. Zok tehillah gemara vayter. Now that we're going to get into, now that we're talking about mason, we're going to get into hilchos mason. Always in called tzarchei hameis. You're allowed to do whatever needs to be done for the mace, and the Gemara is going to discuss what this kol tzarchei hameis is referring to. Sochin, you're allowed to smear the mace. For some reason, they used to moisturize the mace. Umadichin aisoy, and you're allowed to rinse the mace off. Uvavad shelo yazis boy aver. You're not allowed to move a drop. Lo yakbia lo yodoy or ragloy or riseinov. You're not allowed to move the mace at all on Shabbos because it's muksa.
Pretty hard to do that.
I'm sorry.
Pretty hard to do that.
To smear somebody without moving a neighbor.
Well, that's or I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Rinse is easy. You pour water.
Yeah, not if you do it properly.
I don't know if this is a full tahira. This means just rinsing the body. So tomorrow, shoytim esakar mitachtov. No, we don't want mason to be on anything. You always put the mace right on the floor, and the reason for it is you want to keep the mace cold so it shouldn't decompose. So if the mace is lying on a pillow or a mattress, shoytim esakar mitachtov. You pull out the mattress from underneath the mace, and the mattress should be directly on the floor. Matil noisoy al choil, and you allow the mace to fall on the ground. Why would you do that? Tishvil sheyamtin. So the mace should last long. Rashi says, "Shelo yasriach machmas choy masaden v'akar." The mess shouldn't decompose. Kosher shalechi. Your Rashi says you could tie the jaw of the mace. Show you piv haylech v'nichtav. The mace, his mouth was opening, which is not nice. So kosher shalechi, you're allowed to tie up his jaw to prevent it from opening. You're not allowed to close his mouth, but you're allowed to tie it, some type of support around the mess's neck to hold his jaw. If you have a beam in your house that broke, you're not allowed to fix it. But you're allowed to put a bench underneath it so it shouldn't collapse further. With bedboards, you're not allowed to fix it and put it back into position. But you're allowed to do it to prevent it from deteriorating further. How could you do this? The Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Maisa B'Talmidoi Shorab Meir. There was a story with the Talmud of a Meir. Shenichlis Achrab Leveis HaMerchetz. He came, he followed the Meir into the Beis HaMerchetz. Because Ladiach Karka. I remember a while back at the beginning of the Masechta, we actually had this story, and that's where he told him how to warm up the oil. He says it's La'il Mem Gimel Amar Aleph or Mem Mem Beis. So we had this story about a Meir whose Talmud came with him to the Beis HaMerchetz. Because Ladiach Karka, he wanted to rinse off the floor because it was dirty. So Amar Loi, he told him, Ein Madichin, you're not allowed to rinse off the floor. Losuch Karka, he wanted to smear the Karka with oil. He wanted to put oil in the Karka. Again, Amar Loi Ein Sachin, he said, you're not allowed. Why? Because Rashi tells us, because we're always worried if you're rubbing on the floor, if there's a hole there, we're afraid you're flattening it out and you're filling a hole. That's called a shvuye gumois, and that's an issue d'oraisa. We're not allowed to do that. So he said, don't smear the floor because it could fill holes. Now, the problem is that would be on a regular earthen floor, which is what they had in those days. But in the mikveh, they always had a hard surface. In the mikveh, they had a tile floor. So why did their mayor told them not to do it? Obviously, because even though here in this case where there was a hard floor, there's no problem, he didn't want to do it onto a soft floor. No. So Ibazai, why do you let him put oil on the mace? Why aren't you geyser that if you put oil on the mace, you might also come to be a shvuye gumais?
A hard floor to a soft floor, gzera.
I'm sorry?
Isn't it? No.
Well, so Rashi, the problem is Alma Dover ha'osur lataltal osur losach. Since you're not allowed to be metaltal a mace, just like you're not allowed to move the karka around, so to say, you're not allowed to move a mace, you shouldn't be allowed to shmear it. Zok to Gemara, the difference is as follows. Karka b'karka michlef. Kloimer, hahulav mishum tiltalu. The reason why Reb Meir was answering him was not because you're moving earth around, and that would make a muksa. So I was jumping ahead. The Gemara did not think of the reason of a shvuya gumas. The Gemara in the Havmi had assumed it's because since earth is muksa, you're not allowed to put oil on it, which is also muksa. Now the Gemara is saying it has nothing to do with muksa. It all has to do with we're afraid you're going to flatten out the ground. The Alpha got the mechatz rich b'savonim. Even though bathhouses did not have earth floors, they had stone floors. There's nothing to smooth out. Nevertheless, if we allow you to clean or smear the floor of a mikveh, just in case it's not slippery enough, put oil on it, and then it'll be really slippery. Since we don't allow you to do this on an earthen floor, so too we don't allow you to do it on a hard floor. But mace,
sorry, Yosy.
Sorry?
Doing it on an earthen floor, is that a gzera because you might fill up the holes, or is that the actual issa?
It seems like it will do that.
So that's the actual issa.
When you're washing it around, you're going to be a shvi gumus. It sounds from the Gemara, from Rashi, that it's actually going to do that. And the gzeras avonim to karka. But karka, it seems if you pour water on it or oil, it's for sure going to smooth it out.
Right. Otherwise, it'd be gzera.
Correct. So karka b'karka michlav, a mess b'karka lemichlav. So now we'll go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you're allowed to do kol tzorchei hameis, kol lasuyei mai. What tzorchei hameis that was not listed specifically in the Mishnah? What does the Mishnah mean to have? So tomorrow lasuyei had the tanar ban. Mevin clay maker or clay matris. You're allowed to bring cold kalim, metal kalim. Umanichnal kreisa. You're allowed to place them on the belly of the mace. Kadesh lo tepuach. So his stomach shouldn't blow up and possibly split, and that would be terrible, bizarreness. And upagkiness nekevov. You're also allowed to plug the orifices of the mace. Kadesh lo yikenis ben haruach. Again, so air shouldn't get inside and inflate the belly. Vav Shlomo Amar b'chachmosoi, and Shlomo HaMelech said it in his chachma, Ad shelo yirtak chevel hakesef, until his silver rope doesn't get torn. That is Gemara is chut hashedra. That's referring to the chut hashedra. V'soritz gulas azov, and it'll become broken. Its golden pipe. Ze'ama, that is the aver, which we call his golden pipe. V'sishover kad al hamabua, and his jug should break. Zehakeres, that's referring to the stomach. So you see, there's such an Indian that shekresos from mace and nefechas of nefkas. The belly of a mace will naturally swell and rupture. That's why you're allowed to put something on his belly to keep it cool, so that should not happen. And the Shlomo Melech continues, "V'noretz hagalgal elabor," and the wheel will fall into the bar. Ze perish. That's referring to the excrement that comes out of a mace. The Chaynu Omer, and it also says in the pasuk, "V'zarisi perish al panechem." I will throw. Hashem says, "I will throw the excrement on your face." Perish gegem, the excrement from your Yom Tov, which sounds a little bit unusual. We eat on Yom Tov with a mitzvah, and Hashem's taking that and putting it on our face. Omer Avuna v'Amri Law, Omer Abchaga, Elu b'nei Adam shemanichen divrei Torah. These are people who ignore the divrei Torah. V'oisin kol yemeim kechagim. They party every day, and since they party so much and they indulge too much, Hashem throws this back on their face, the fruits of their indulgences. Omer Belevi, Omer Papi, Omer Beshua. After 3 days, creation of kas, the stomach of a mace ruptures, and the ray goes on his face. And he's told, I don't know who says it, toil mashal satabi. The stomach throws it back in your face. All this that you put inside me, take it back. And again, it's referring to people who aren't eating Shem Shemayim; they're eating for their own law. Take back what you put into me. Rabbi Elvin spoke out from somebody that it's interesting to note that the fourth bracha of benching is that the haruge beiter toiva metiv is to thank Hashem for the haruge beiter that are nitten l'kfura. So the shaila is, why punct in benching is it the appropriate place to thank Hashem for the haruge beiter? So he said that eating is what determines how a person eats, determines if his stomach's going to pop open or not. So when you're talking about eating, that's a time to be thankful to the Rebbeinu Shalom that their bodies were not mutal b'bezayin, rather they were nitn l'kfura. Zogt Gemara weiter. Ein me'atzmin es a mace b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to close the eyes of a mace on Shabbos. Afilu acher yitzias neshama, because the mace is ba'aver. You're moving muksa. So you're not allowed to close the eyes of a mace on Shabbos, v'loy b'chol, and not even in the weekday im yitzias nefesh, when he's dying. If someone closes the eyes of a mace while the mace is dying, that's considered a murderer. And the Gemara is going to explain, just a little movement of the body of a goysis can cause a goysis to die. And we're makbid on the life of a person, even if it's a mere seconds. We have quality of life. No matter what condition a person is in, we value that quality of life to preserve it as long as possible. Rabbi Elvin spoke out, and I don't know this, I never heard this before, that the mess's eyes, once the mess dies, are supposed to be closed, and it's supposed to be closed by the mess's sons. I never heard that before, but last night I was listening to Rabbi Elvin, and he said that. Taner Rabban, Hama'atzmoi imitzis hanefesh harei shefech tam. Moshel ner shekova v'ylechet. It's a muzzle to a candle that's starting to flicker and starting to go out. If you put your finger on it, miyat kavsa, it's going to be extinguished, and therefore it's like you killed a mace. Tanya If somebody wants the eyes of the mace to close, so there's different things you can do besides closing his eyes. Either you can blow wine into his nose, or you can put oil between his eyelashes, and pull his two toes, and they'll close by themselves. People who are in the Chevra Kedisha, is this ever done? Anybody? No. Okay. Tanya, Tindik ben Yoimai, Chai, a little baby, if he's alive, Machalin Olav Shabbos, you could be Machal Shabbos, even though a Tindik is like relatively insignificant. But David Melech Yisrael Meis, even the king of Klal Yisrael, if he's not alive, Ein Machal Olav Shabbos. What a contrast. Tindik ben Yoimai Chai Machal Olav Shabbos, because Amr Torah Chalel Olav Shabbos Echad, be Machal Shabbos for him, one Shabbos. So in the future, he should be able to keep many more Shabbos. Now, of course, this isn't the real reason, because you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos for somebody who's dying, who's at the end of his life, who probably won't be able to keep many more Shabbos. It's really Aks V'chai B'hem. But the Gemara is just saying this as a thought. David Melch Yisrael Meis and Mechal Nalav Kivin Shemeis Adam Botel Mun Mitzvahs. He can no longer do mitzvahs. By Meisim Chavshi, with death you're free. Kivin Shemes Adam Nashe Chavshi Min Mitzvahs. Well, Tanya, Shmuel sent out a video on Tisha B'Av about Mr. Lefkowitz, Joseph Lefkowitz. How he was involved in tracking down Nazis after the war to bring them to justice, because he suffered in many concentration camps. And he commented on the Arbeit Macht Frei sign in Auschwitz that sure is Macht Frei. So Macht Frei, because when one dies, he's free from the work. So Kivin Shemeis Adam Nafsachosh Min HaMitzvos. The Tanya B'Shimon Elazar Omer Tinnik Ben Yoimei Chai, a newborn baby. Naturally, animals are afraid of a human being. Once the oig is dead, then you have to protect the corpse from mice, from vermin. You'll be fear. Your fear will be on the chayes arts. The fear is no longer upon you. A lion will never attack two people. Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky, in his Emes Liyaakov, says in this Gemara, a beitre means if a person's neshama is at peace with his guf, meaning he's treating the union properly, where he's doing mitzvahs and he's bringing his guf to ruchnius, a person who's an adam sholem, a lion will not attack him. In fact, we've seen lions attack even two people. So tomorrow, who could the Rambam Bachama ein chay shalos ba'adam at shenidme like a behema. Once a person looks like a behema, meaning he's not acting like a yid, that's when he's in danger of being attacked by a lion. Let's see if Rashi speaks about this. Now Rashi says on the first thing, so the Gemara, Shenemar Adam Bikar, a person who is a value, Bal Yolan, but Nimshal Kabehemois Nidmu. So the ArtScroll teaches this very nicely. He explains what it says in the pasuk. It says, Adam Bikar, for man in his glory he shall not repose, but he is ruled. When will he be ruled? Like by animals? When is he in danger? When he appears like animals to an animal, and that is when he's not. That is when he's not acting properly. Okay. Zok tahil gemor vayter. Amar Chanina also lishon b'vayis yechidi. You're not allowed to sleep in a house alone. V'chol yoshem b'vayis yechidi, and anybody who sleeps in the house alone, achzos lilas, he will be attacked by the shade. Now there's a lot of Torah on this. They bring down halacha lemaisa. That's only if your house is isolated. If you live on the street and there's other houses around, that's not a problem. If the door is not locked, those are say it's not a problem. So there's a whole bunch of different details to this. So when your wife's away in the country, or if she's away on vacation, you're home alone, that's not an issue. V'tanya b'shum ben Elazar Omer, Asay, give tzedakah, achat moitze umatzi lach, v'aydu b'yotcha. When you still have, Rashi teaches all these things, Asay tzedakah, achat moitze u'milasich, if you can find someone to give tzedakah to, umatzi lach, and you have money, v'aydu b'yotcha, aydecha b'shus akoyim b'shamus. So when you still can give tzedakah and do chesed, chap arayin. Vav shloima amar b'chachmasoi u'zacharias baracha. Remember, HaKadosh Baruch Hu do mitzvahs b'mei b'chorisecha when you're strong. Ad asher lo yavayu meira, before the bad days come, when you get older, elu yimei zikna, when it's hard to do the mitzvahs. V'yigiu shonim. Asher toimer, the years are going to come. Asher toimer ein libam chayfetz. Before the years come where you don't have benefit from. Which years don't you have benefit from? Elu yimei HaMashiach she'ein b'hem lo yischus v'lo yichayva. The Yimei HaMashiach, you can't do mitzvahs anymore. It's too late. U'pliga de Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel. Ein ben olam hazel Yimei HaMashiach. Shmuel holds that Avada, you could do mitzvahs for Yimei HaMashiach. Because he says the only difference between olam hazel and Yimei HaMashiach, elo shibud machios b'vad, meaning we won't have to pay taxes anymore. There will still be mitzvahs. And there'll be poor people to support and to chesed with, even Yimei HaMashiach. Tanya. Rabbi Lezer Kafar Omer. La'olam yivakish adam rachmim al midazu. A person should always daven to the Rebbeinu Shalom about this midah. Why? Shem hu loy ba b'noi. If he doesn't come to Anias, his son will come to Anias. B'noi loy ba ben b'noi. Because the world is like galgal chayzer. Shneimar ki b'galal hadover hazeh. And we dash, it's a gilgal, meaning things go up and things go down, and because the world's a gagal chayzer, and eventually someone's going to be struggling, and you have to daven that we should have pranos. It's a cycle, and people are up, people are down. We learned that a Talmud Chacham loy ma'ani will not ever be poor. In fact, more, what are you talking about? We see Talmud Chacham are poor. So tomorrow, even if you see that Talmud Chacham are poor, they don't have to run from door to door, knocking on doors. That they don't have to do. The Mefarshim say it's not in Rashi, but the Mefarshim say that because people tend to help them. Reb Chia told his wife, when an ani comes, to go quickly bring him bread. You know why? So that when your children are poor, then the people will give him bread. She told him, are you cursing your children that they should be poor? He told her, what are you talking about? It's just a matter of time. Eventually it's going to happen. And when our descendants someday might be poor, we want to hope that they'll also be shown chesed by people. What do we learn from there? That's called merachim ala briyos. If someone has rachmanis on briyos, then merachim in alav min hashemayim. Then they'll have rachmanis on him. And someone who's not merachim ala briyos, ein merachim in alav min hashemayim, then they won't have rachmanis on him in hashemayim. Ad asher latech shechashemesh, until the sun sets, the or and the light. That's referring to zupadachas ve'choitim. That's referring to the forehead of the nose, which when a person's young, he's smooth forehead, and when he gets older, it becomes crinkled and his nose juts out more. So that's referring to the to old age. V'hayereach zu neshama. That's referring to his neshama. Like a chavim ela listos. Those are referring to his cheeks. Shovu ha'avim achar geshem. And the clouds will go after the rain. Zuma erein of shaladam. That refers to the eyesight of a person, which also he loses as he gets older. Shahoylech achar habechi, that it gets depleted. He loses his eyesight because he's crying. Omar Shmuel, haidemasa, tears that are moisture that leave his body. Adar boin shnin, till he's 40 years old. Hadra, the moisture will be regenerated in his body. The kan velach, once a person is over 40, loy hadra, it will not come back. High kuchla ad arbon shnin marvach. Kuchla, Rashi says, is what did I say? I believe it's referring to it's a salve. It's a shmear that you smear on your eyes. So up to 40 years, marvach, it helps. And it increases your eyesight. It makes your eyesight better. Even if you put so much salve on your eye, like a beam, it will sustain, it'll retain, it'll preserve the eyesight that you have. But it's not going to improve it. My kumashmalam, what do you learn from here? The more of the salve that you put on, the better it is for your eyes. Because when you're younger, it'll improve your eyesight. When you're older, it will at least preserve it. Abchanina, his child died. He didn't cry for his child. His wife said, "You're not crying, your child died. Is it like a chicken died? It's your child, it's your flesh and blood. You should be crying." Tarti tichla ve'ivra. It's bad enough that I lost my child. You want me to also become blind? Sover Laki Ha, he held like this halacha. There's 6 types of tears. Shalish shafos, v'shalish rois. 3 of them are good tears, and 3 of them are bad tears. Shal Oshan, if it's smoke that makes you tear. V'shal Bechi, or crying because of sad things. V'shal Beis Akisei, and if you're crying because of the pain of pushing out what you need to, the Beis Akisei rois, they're bad. Shal Sam, if it's from medicine that makes you tear. V'shal Schoik, or from laughter. V'shal Pears, or from onions. Yofos, those are good. And let's stop over here. Shkoich, Rabbi Say.
Shkoich.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And the Mitzvah we'll learn tomorrow.
Shkoich.
Shkoich.